Part 47. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 461. This is the small world of Time Basin. Lin An came back that day, and after spending a few days with the girls, he took action to create this special small world in the time domain. The reason why it is said to be special is because the time domain in this small world is much more terrifying than all existing small worlds. 1,000 times. On that day, Lin An used his eternal cultivation and almost exhausted all his strength to create several small worlds with 1,000 times flow rate. One of them was reserved for himself, and the other 4 were reserved for the 4 girls. Now, 1 year has passed, and Lin An's time in the small world has passed 1,000 years. On this day, in this small world that had been at rest, a faint light suddenly flashed, and then a figure suddenly appeared in front of the small world. It's Lin. At this moment, Lin An looked around his room, and there was a hint of trance and nostalgia in his eyes. And on his body, there is an indescribable sense of vicissitudes of life. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed. Although only 1 year has passed in the outside world, Lin An has spent thousands of years in it, tens of thousands of years, in the blink of an eye. With a thought, a terrifying wave of thoughts spread out in an instant. If there was an eternal being here, he would definitely be so shocked that his eyes would fall out at this moment. This thought is like a tsunami gushing out of an endless abyss. It is as vast as an abyss and a prison, and it sweeps wherever it passes. This kind of terrifying thought is obviously not something that Eternal can imagine, but, the Lord. After sitting for 1,000 years, you will eventually become the master. Muttering to himself, Lin An's eyes seemed to be sighing, and without any movement, he just swept across the vast Kyushu territory and the even more boundless earth with his thoughts. And this kind of exploration lasted for almost a stick of incense. After a stick of incense, Lin An's thoughts gradually calmed down, and the fluctuations in his body gradually recovered. He was no longer as old as an old man, but had regained his former indifference. I can't believe that the outside world has changed a lot in 1 year. Lin An murmured to himself, his face showing no emotion or anger. For a moment, Lin An's mind moved slightly, and his body quietly disappeared, without the slightest breath emerging. And when it reappeared, it was already on the earth. On the current earth, all the scenes of earth-shattering and shattering have disappeared, replaced by a magnificent scenery like a great river and mountains. This earth has almost completely returned to its original state. Lin An nodded subconsciously. The origin of the earth was doing its best. If there is no law to take action and the earth itself recovers on its own, it will take who knows how many years. The current situation is obviously the handiwork of the origin of the earth. At this moment, a wave of energy suddenly appeared in front of Lin An. The blue stream of light circulated out of thin air, and in the blink of an eye, it gathered into a shape. It was the origin of the earth. Seeing Lin An, Earth Origin was obviously shocked. Lin. You actually. Lin An glanced at him indifferently, but this glance made Earth Origin freeze up, and for a moment he felt like he had fallen into an ice cellar. This feeling, could it be that of a master? Only the Lord can give me such a terrifying feeling. It's only been a year. It's only been a year, and you've already made a breakthrough. Are you still human? Lin An's expression remained unchanged. What's the big deal? It's just a breakthrough. The origin of the earth suddenly stagnated, and I felt as if I had eaten the wrong thing and was suffocating. I held it in for a long time, but I couldn't even say a word. Lin An turned around and looked at the great country below, and spoke calmly. Now that the recovery of the earth has come to an end, I will bring back humanity, and then I will prepare the Kyushu territory to come to the earth, and the ancient trees of life will take root underground. The origin of the earth was stunned, and then he didn't say anything and just acquiesced. Just kidding, what else can he say in front of the Lord? Lin An seemed unaware and ignored Earth Origin's expression, but continued to speak. In addition, the sun in the sky is still a bit small. The Earth is now so big that it is absolutely impossible for the sun to look like a tiny dot. I will imitate the proportions of the original Earth and make the sun a bit bigger, so that the original appearance of the Earth can be restored. The origin of the Earth is a bit sluggish. Make the sun bigger. Lin En was stunned. What's the problem? The origin of the Earth was stunned. The sun can get bigger? The laws of the sun are not that simple. Lin En understood the meaning of the origin of the Earth in an instant, smiled faintly, and did not say more on this issue, but turned to speak. That's all I have to say for now. I don't want to restrict you in any way, but you should know what you can and cannot do. The corners of Earth Origin's mouth twitched. Do you need to say this, in front of your master's cultivation? It's clear and unclear. Lin En nodded, and then his figure suddenly disappeared. Earth Origin was stunned for a moment, then secretly shook his head. There is no spatial fluctuation, and the person has disappeared. Is this the master? 1 year, Lord, tut. It's not a human being. Fortunately, I didn't fight him to the death. Alas. Sighs resounded in this world, and the origin of the Earth turned around, turning into countless blue streams of light and dissipating. And Lin has arrived in outer space, within the universe. The Earth is now almost as big as the entire solar system. If the Earth's repulsion had not increased, it would have hit the sun long ago. Now, the fiery red sphere is quietly suspended in the darkness, like a newborn baby compared to the huge Earth. As for the other planets in the solar system, no one knows where they have drifted to. Perhaps they have already scattered far away. At this moment, Lin En looked at the distant sun with a little divine light in his eyes. Looking closely, the divine light was actually golden. As the master, he now looked at the distant sun, and it seemed that what he saw was no longer a big fireball, but countless mysterious laws intertwined together. After a while, there was enlightenment in Lin En's eyes, and the golden divine light gradually faded away. So the sun is just this simple. It seems that I was able to intervene in the sun in the past when I was in the ancient times, or even in the realm of God or lower, but it was quite difficult to do so because my realm was low. The lower the realm, the more difficult it is. Now that I have taken control, this seemingly amazing idea has no difficulty in practice. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 462. There was understanding in Lin En's eyes, but also a slight joy. The improvement of cultivation level is always gratifying. After 1,000 years, it is worth it to be promoted to the master. In that case, son, become bigger. The faint voice sounded like a sigh or a murmur, but it didn't seem to have the slightest deterrent effect. However, just as Lin En's voice fell, there was an extremely terrifying thought that spread thousands of miles away in an instant and was boundless. The unspeakable terrifying idea suddenly crossed the void and descended on the sun, completely covering the void of the universe where the sun was located. The next second, the stationary sun suddenly trembled slightly. The fire started to suddenly rise from the surface of the sun, and there was an oppressive aura rising from the inside of the sun, as if the power of God was coming. As this feeling of terror became more and more intense, at a certain moment, a dull roar suddenly came from the interior of the sun. And cracks began to appear on the surface of the sun. At the same time as this crack appeared, the sun as a whole suddenly began to expand slightly and undetectably, and then it intensified. As the sun expands, the cracks on the sun's surface also expand more and more, expanding to tens of thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. However, as the cracks expanded, a golden light suddenly emerged from those cracks. In the blink of an eye, the light quickly became almost dazzling. Powerful golden light rises, spreading across countless cracks like adhesive, and from the depths of those cracks, endless golden light is projected. Gradually, where the golden light shines, a fiery red entity that is the same as the sun itself emerges. That golden light gave birth to the same ingredients as the sun. With the gestation of golden light, the cracks on the surface of the sun were immediately greatly repaired, and under this situation, the sun began to continue to expand. It was originally just a red light spot next to the huge Earth. In the blink of an eye, it already had the initial scale of a giant star. Not only that, as the sun expands, its position also changes and begins to move in the opposite direction of the Earth. In front of the Earth, Lin An's eyes were glowing with golden light. If he looked carefully, even his entire pupils turned into a golden state. Preliminarily, it seems that the effect is relatively stable, as long as it continues. With a whisper, Lin An stood with his hands behind his hands, quietly looking at the sun that was getting bigger in the distance. Time flies by. At a certain moment, the sun was already far away from the Earth, and its size had undergone earth-shaking changes, and it was now as big as the Earth. It has expanded countless times. Lin An's eyes shone with a divine light. With size, you also need to balance the gravity and repulsion to maintain a fixed orbit. Muttering to himself, the sun in the distance began to change, and together with the Earth, it began to change. The two planets were both extremely huge, separated by a distance of light years, and they suddenly started circling each other. Double stars twine, not bad. Lin An spoke calmly, raised his hand again, and a large planet suddenly disappeared from a wireless distance and appeared not far in front of Lin An in the blink of an eye. The sun is not enough. The sun and the moon shine together to make the Earth. Lin An spoke calmly, the light in his eyes reappeared, and the terrifying thought came down again. In an instant, the moon, which had become smaller than a sesame seed in front of the Earth, also began to expand. When the expansion reached a certain level, the moon began to revolve around the Earth under Lin An's thoughts. The real sun and moon shine together. Now, the Earth is what it should be. Lin murmured to himself, and his figure gradually disappeared from here. Kyushu domain. The people in the Kyushu domain had already exploded. The sight of the expanding sun fell into their eyes. Even Chen Daoming and Yi Zhan were horrified. At this moment, Lin An quietly appeared in the Kyushu domain. The familiar meditation fell into my eyes, and there was some feeling in Lin's eyes, which dissipated after a moment. Chen Daoming, Yi Zhan, this emperor has come out of seclusion. Lin An's voice didn't seem to cause any trouble, and the place was still peaceful. However, the two people in different positions in the depths heard the familiar voice very clearly. Lin. After hearing the message, the two people rushed over immediately. Are you finally willing to leave the house? As soon as he saw Lin An, Chen Daoming couldn't help but speak. Lin An smiled lightly, after this time, I probably won't be in seclusion again. Chen Daoming was shocked. You succeeded. He knew very clearly the reason why Lin An was in seclusion. Lin An nodded, with a faint smile in his eyes. The safety of the entire world falls on me, how dare I slack off? Besides, after so many years, have I ever let you down? Chen Daoming couldn't help but be startled, and he paused before speaking again, with an obvious look of sadness in his eyes. That's right. After all these years, your kid has always been like a monster. He is simply not human. Lin An couldn't help but smile bitterly. How could you say that about your son-in-law? You really do. Chen Daoming also smiled. This time you broke through the master. The Earth finally has the power to protect itself. Not to mention defeating the mysterious thing, self-protection alone is obviously enough. There was indifference in Lin An's eyes. That's what I said, but you still have to do what you need to do. Chen Daoming was shocked. Are you ready to leave? Lin An nodded. I'm ready to leave, but before I leave, I need to make some arrangements on Earth. Chen Daoming was stunned, and then he seemed to suddenly think of something, and a little surprise appeared on his face, that, the changes in the sun and the moon, You won't tell me that you did it. Lin En was stunned. What's wrong? It's me. It's really you. Chen Daoming was surprised in his eyes, and then he couldn't help but smile bitterly again. You kid, you make big moves as soon as you come out, and the entire Zhou territory is almost scared to death by you. Lin En was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly looked astonished. He obviously understood what Chen Daoming meant at once. The sun expands countless times, which is indeed terrifying. After a moment, Lin En spoke to the two of them. I have called you here this time because I have a decision to tell you. Then you go and make some arrangements. We will start soon. When this matter is over, I will also left. Yi Zhan was stunned. So serious? Why is it so serious? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 463. Lin En's eyes had a little smile and a little yearning. I plan to move the entire Zhou region to the earth, so that the ancient tree of life can take root directly on the earth. Things on the earth have calmed down. The earth now has no man-made disasters, and it has almost recovered to its pre-disaster state. We can move there at any time. I have already made a call to the origin of the earth, and he dare not disobey my wishes. A series of words shocked the two of them. After a while, Chen Daoming smiled bitterly, with some feelings in his eyes. This is good, the earth is our real home. Lin En nodded, and he meant this. The two quickly went to prepare. The notice was issued layer by layer, and the notice reached the ears of the people. It obviously took some time for all this to work. And Lin En had already flashed back to his residence above the frost sky. Lin En's residence has 3 floors and many rooms. Before Lin En went into seclusion, he gave each of them a small world with 1,000 times the flow rate so that they could go into seclusion. Lin En sat for 1,000 years, and I think it was the same for them. At this moment, he looked at them one by one and found that they were still in seclusion, and Lin En did not disturb them. This migration is for the entire Zhou domain. Under the overall relocation, they are in the residence and will not cause any impact. The small world created by Lin En will naturally be very stable. After notifying the ancient tree of life about this matter, not long after, Chen Daoming and Yi Zhan's voice transmission came one after another, and Lin En also appeared outside in a flash. Everything is ready. There was a little excitement in Lin En's eyes, and a faint golden light began to emerge, and then it began to become more and more intense. The terrifying will came out of his body, and in the blink of an eye it spread out, spreading throughout the entire Zhou domain, and the huge power of the law also began to appear. Zhou domain began to move. Beside him, Chen Daoming and Yi Zhan were standing not far away. At this moment, their expressions were extremely shocked. The terrifying pressure on Lin En was clearly felt. Until now, they had a clear understanding of what domination meant. They could sense in detail that if Lin En wanted them to die, it was just a thought. And under their shocked feelings, Zhou domain gradually began to move. An extremely large super-huge space crack was right in front of them. The crack was so huge that it was enough to load the entire Zhou domain. And with this movement, the entire Zhou domain finally gradually sank into the crack. Earth. East. Above the clear sky, a huge crack suddenly tore open. This crack was so large that it was enough to cover tens of thousands of miles away. It seemed endless at a glance. As the crack spread, not long after, a huge monster floated out of the crack. It was Zhou domain. As it moved bit by bit, the whole picture of Zhou domain gradually revealed itself, and the huge space crack quietly shrank into nothingness after the Zhou domain appeared. And Zhou domain began to sink. Lin En's choice was naturally on a plain in the east. As Zhou domain gradually fell, the roots of the ancient tree of life began to get closer and closer to the ground, and soon, they finally fell on the ground. The extremely huge law of life began to spread immediately, and the roots of the ancient tree of life began to grow rapidly and began to take root in the ground at a rapid speed. The terrifying roots, under the effect of the law of life, are comparable to unparalleled weapons, and the speed of spread is simply terrifying. And under such expansion, the figure of the ancient tree of life gradually began to stabilize. Emperor Lin, it's okay. The voice of the ancient tree of life came. Lin An nodded lightly, and the great power applied to the entire Zhu domain gradually began to dissipate. Not bad, everything went well. Lin An sighed secretly, and as soon as he moved his mind, a strong law of life surged towards the ancient tree of life. Although the ancient tree of life had taken root, its foundation was certainly shallow. Under the effect of the law of life, the speed of taking root could be guaranteed. Thank you, Emperor Lin. The voice of the ancient tree of life came, not because Lin An was helping him, but because Lin An had still advanced to the master, the first person in the world. Even the origin of the earth was not as good as Lin An. Lin An nodded lightly, naturally knowing the reason, but still said, the ancient tree of life doesn't have to be like this, you have saved me before, so naturally you don't need such courtesy. Besides, the bearing of the 9 provinces still needs your dedication. The ancient tree of life didn't say anything more, and naturally there was joy in his heart. Lin An moved and instantly moved away from thousands of miles away. From a distance, there was a huge super ancient tree standing between heaven and earth. Its trunk was like a giant pillar of heaven and earth, and its branches and leaves were like clouds hanging from the sky. And on top of the ancient tree, there were continents emerging between the branches. Lin An had a satisfied look in his eyes. With a wave of his hand, the floating island detached from the ancient tree of life and flew directly to the ground thousands of miles away. Yizhan, take the people back to the ground. From now on, you will still be the deputy commander of the ground, and Chen Daoming will still be the deputy commander of the sky. Yizhan took the order and began to migrate with the people on the floating island. Despite this, the buildings on the floating island were all left on the floating island. Lin An swept his mind and was surprised to find that the floating island had actually undergone considerable changes. On the island, there were lush vegetation and fireworks, but there were already many exquisite buildings on the island. These buildings were extremely strange, and Lin An had never seen them before. The height was quite similar to that of modern buildings, but the appearance was not lacking in the beauty of pavilions and towers of classical buildings. What surprised Lin An the most was that in the center of the floating island, a super building several thousand meters high suddenly rose from the ground. Is this a new palace prepared for me? These people are really thoughtful. Lin An's expression moved, and his figure disappeared. 3 days later, Lin An raised his hand in front of the ancient tree of life, and the floating island began to soar. Lin An waved his hand again, and above the frost sky, Lin An's original residence on the treetop quietly dissipated, revealing 5 twisted whirlpools in it. 1,000 times smaller world. The small world slowly drifted away, giving up the position of the treetops, and the floating island continued to rise and appeared above the treetops. Floating island above the frost sky. From now on, this floating island is the new residence of this emperor, and it will be named Emperor Tian Island. On Emperor Tian Island, the 1,000-story building is the new Emperor Tian Palace. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 464. 1 month later. The 4 Kingian girls are still in their small world. At 1,000 times flow rate, the concept of time has become extremely blurred, so this situation is normal. I remember when Lin An was in seclusion for a year, it was the same situation. At this moment, Lin An stood in front of the Emperor Tian Palace, with a strong excitement in his eyes. That is not only exciting, but also an extremely powerful fighting spirit, a passion as high as the sky. If I destroy you, the world will be completely peaceful. Are you ready? Mysterious existence, this emperor is here. The scornful aura overflowed without reservation, and for a moment, the whole world was changing, with thunder and lightning roaring. The unparalleled fighting spirit turned into a torrent, stirring the wind and clouds to form an extremely huge whirlpool, washing away for hundreds of millions of miles. The next moment, Lin An's figure turned into a golden stream of light, rising from the ground on the floating island, thousands of miles high in the sky in an instant. The rich golden stream of light formed a beautiful long golden line, starting from the floating island and spreading to an endless distance into the sky. This scene fell in the eyes of Chen Daoming, in the eyes of Yizhan, in the eyes of the Emperor Tianjun, and in the eyes of countless people on earth or in the 9 provinces. Countless people looked up at the golden rainbow and prayed silently. Emperor Lin, you must come back safely. It seems that there is really no concept of time. Lin An turned into a rainbow and flashed across hundreds of millions of miles in a blink of an eye. It's been a long time since this galloping. Following the direction in which he intercepted the meteorite flow, Lin An ran wildly and entered the depths of the universe. Until a certain moment, Lin An suddenly felt something in his heart and looked suddenly in one direction. He felt a breath. The atmosphere of the same place. At this moment, Lin An already understood that the words of the origin of the earth were not alarmist, and the other party had really reached the realm of dominance. But even so, Lin An's eyes still showed little fluctuation. The other party was the master, and he had already expected it, and could not stir up the slightest disturbance in Lin An's heart. It can be said that Lin An's heart cannot be shaken even when facing opponents from the same realm. Over the years, he has remained invincible. With the full attribute law and the unique power of collapse, Lin An has already stood at the top from the very beginning. All he needs is time to grow. Now, the time he needs is enough. With a strong fighting spirit in his eyes, Lin An's eyes glowed with a faint golden light, turning into a rainbow and flying away like lightning. As he moved forward, the land ahead began to get darker and darker. In the very distance, Lin An could faintly see that the space in front of him began to appear densely dim. The universe is originally dark, but there are endless planets, and a large part of these planets emit light, so the entire universe does not appear to be so purely dark. However, ahead, the light sources transmitted by those planets are missing. Lin An looked forward as he moved forward. The endless darkness seemed to vaguely present a circular area, and along with the circular area, there was an extremely depressing feeling. Like a dark abyss. Cosmic abyss, Lin An murmured to himself, his expression still unfazed, and he quickly moved towards the place he sensed. Not long after, Lin An suddenly sensed that the fluctuation he sensed seemed to be in front of him. Moreover, in the distance ahead, you can also faintly see that there seems to be a vague shadow sitting cross-legged in the void. As Lin An looked, there was a voice coming from above the shadow. "You're finally here." Lin An couldn't help but his eyes narrowed, but his speed didn't slow down at all. "Are you waiting for me? You are the human emperor on Earth. Sooner or later, you and I will have a battle." Lin's eyes flashed. "You are still thinking about the Earth. The universe is so big, but the original planet was born. In this universe, there seems to be only one Earth." A cold light flashed in Lin An's eyes. "You insist on plundering the origin of the Earth just to improve your strength." The other party laughed. The laughter sounded a little hoarse, and there was a hint of vicissitudes of life in it. After a while, "Strength? I am the master, what else can I improve? I want the origin of the Earth just to help my true body get out of trouble." Lin An couldn't help but his eyes flashed, and wonder emerged in his heart. "Where is your true body?" The shadow seemed helpless and pointed towards the darkness behind him. "The Emperor's true body is trapped in the abyss of the universe. Only the energy impact of the source can help the Emperor escape." Lin couldn't help but laugh. If this is the reason, then there is nothing to say. As he spoke, Lin En also rushed towards the phantom's predecessor, but it was only 1,000 feet away. Xueying also smiled lightly, so I am waiting for you here. It took me so many years to finally cultivate this clone to the same level as the main body. Unexpectedly, I have not experienced the feeling of invincibility before we meet my opponent. Lin En raised his eyebrows. What kind of existence is your body? Xueying smiled lightly and shook his head. After this battle, there will definitely be only one left between you and me, so it doesn't hurt to tell you. I am not originally from this universe, but I accidentally entered here when I was escaping. Once I entered here, this universe used its laws to suppress me and pressed me into the abyss of this universe. If it weren't for my supernatural powers and the temporary creation of a clone, I would have given up everything in the abyss of the universe and returned to nothingness. After saying this, Lin En's eyes suddenly showed some surprise. You mean, other universes? The shadow nodded. I didn't know there were other universes. I only discovered this after feeling the completely different rules of the universe here. From my years of understanding, there is more than one universe, but it is endless. Just like there are other planets outside the Earth, there are other universes outside the universe. It's just that just like there are conditions for humans to leave the Earth, there are also harsh conditions for leaving the universe. Lin En nodded lightly. So that's how it is, I've learned. The shadow waved his hand. No need to say more, you and I are in different camps, each with our own reasons. This battle is inevitable. Lin En's eyes were filled with fighting spirit. That's what I meant. After this battle, everything is over. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 465. As the words fell, a rich golden light suddenly appeared in Lin En's eyes. In the blink of an eye, the crystal clear eyes turned golden. Looking at Lin En's appearance, the shadow couldn't help but sigh. The last time I saw you, you were just like an ant. It's really hard to imagine that in such a short time, you have reached such a realm. As the words came, the shadow's sitting figure began to stand up, and a majestic momentum rose with it. Interesting. Then, let's fight to our heart's content. Lin En smiled lightly, but there was a cold light surging in his eyes, and a violent cold light flashed in his golden eyes. Lin En didn't see any movement, but suddenly a terrifying wave condensed from in front of Lin En. It was a dazzling golden light. The rich light spread and condensed into shape in an instant, forming a total of 7 huge slashes lined up in sequence. The extremely terrifying law fluctuations condensed from it, and there were also strong collapse fluctuations transmitted from it. Under the extremely strong pressure, the void in front of the golden slash actually had a slight crack. Lin En's eyes shone brightly, and with a light shout, 7 slashes rushed towards the phantom at the same time. Looking at this terrifying offensive with overwhelming momentum, the phantom's face could not see much expression, but there was a movement at this moment. He was seen bowing slightly, his arms stretched forward, and swept in the direction of Lin En. In an instant, the extremely huge super-large slash was launched horizontally, and it seemed to be still illusory, but the almost transparent overall appearance of the slash could be clearly seen. It was a huge super-large slash that spanned tens of thousands of miles. With the formation of the slash, a momentum also began, rushing towards the 7 golden rays at lightning speed. The terrifying bombardment was completely launched at this moment. Boom! Under the extremely violent roar, the terrifying law turbulence swept away instantly, and at the center of the collision, this twisted slash that stretched out across the sky actually shattered all 7 golden slashes in an instant. However, while the slash was shattered, there were also dark cracks on the transparent slash that spread instantly, and countless fragments exploded in the next second. Lin En's eyes flashed with excitement. He must win this battle. Swish. Raising his hand and waving it, Lin En finally started to move at this moment. There was a violent golden light condensing in his hand, which suddenly condensed into a golden spear. Lin En smiled lightly, come and fight. Holding the spear tightly, the next moment, Lin En's figure disappeared in an instant, and appeared in front of the phantom in the blink of an eye, and stabbed the phantom with a spear. The phantom's figure immediately changed, and while the body retreated instantly, another slash was swung out when he raised his hand. Lin En smiled and immediately changed direction, and then stabbed directly at the slashing blow. Boom! Amidst the roar, Lin En's momentum was like a rainbow, and he directly tore the slashing blow into two halves, and Lin En went straight through the center of the crack and quickly chased after the phantom. And the phantom's slashing blow when retreating was obviously just a slight block. After a while, he also had a strong distortion, and then a translucent longsword condensed out. Lin En smiled, without any fear on his face, but a strong fighting spirit emerged. That's right. In this battle, it's either you die or I die. In a loud shout, Lin En rushed to the front of the phantom and collided with it directly. In the blink of an eye, violent roars sounded hundreds of times. Boom boom boom. Amidst the continuous roar, there spread out waves of terrifying impacts like waves. The chaotic law turbulence formed a storm, raging wildly here. However, in a short period of time, the two had collided tens of thousands of times. Bang! Under the violent collision, Lin En's figure was pushed back tens of thousands of feet by the terrifying impact. With his eyes slightly lowered, he suddenly found that there was a crack on the tip of the spear in his hand. Lin En grinned, threw away the spear in his hand, and condensed another one with a wave of his hand, and then continued to rush towards the phantom at a high speed. On the other side, the phantom was in the same situation. The longsword with a dark crack was thrown out for countless billions of miles, and a new longsword appeared in the hand of the phantom in an instant, and then rushed towards the opponent again like Lin En. This battle will not stop until the winner is determined. The roar never stopped. This naked melee battle lasted for several hours. At a certain moment, there was a loud shout. Die! Looking intently, I saw Lin En on the side pick up the Shadow's longsword with a gun, and then the long gun in his hand turned into a torrent and shot towards the Shadow at a high speed. In an instant, the golden torrent flashed by. At the critical moment, the Shadow raised his hand and waved, and a small shield twisted to the extreme appeared in front of him, and he himself retreated instantly. The speed of the golden light was extremely terrifying. It came in an instant almost when the small shield was formed, and shot directly in the center of the small shield. Under the terrifying impact, the small shield twisted to the extreme, but it only supported the familiarity, and then it exploded into countless fragments. However, the momentum of the golden spear did not decrease at all, but continued to shoot towards the Shadow. The phantom moved very quickly. Seeing the small shield explode, he immediately raised his hand and swung it. Immediately, there was a huge twisted slash that met the wind. Lin En's eyes condensed, and his figure disappeared in an instant. The next moment, Lin En, who was originally tens of thousands of miles away, appeared directly behind the phantom in an instant. Without the slightest hesitation, all the moves were completed in an instant. Both parties were at the level of the master, and any negligence could lead to death. Almost at the moment of showing his figure, Lin En immediately slapped the phantom. This palm was the same size as Lin En's palm, but there was a strong golden light flashing on it. However, the phantom not far away changed his face in an instant. A strong sense of crisis rose from his heart, and there was a chill coming from behind him. The phantom still existed for countless years, so naturally he understood what happened in an instant. Without the slightest hesitation, the phantom did not even turn around, and the free left hand directly swung out behind him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 466. In an instant, as far as the naked eye could see, it was a huge slash that had been condensed into substance, and suddenly shot out from Su Ying's body. Boom! All the moves were extremely swift, and when the slashes appeared, a deafening and terrifying roar appeared. In the center, it was Lin An's palm that directly hit the slash. In an instant, a terrifying chill spread from the palm of his hand, and there was an extremely terrifying shock, which spread directly from the palm to the arm. And the shock wave that followed rushed directly to his face. In an instant, Lin An couldn't help but move backwards. On the other hand, the phantom was shattered into countless points of light in an instant, and a golden palm print of light came out of Lin An's palm, directly hitting the phantom's back. The phantom spurted out a mouthful of blood. But this was not over yet. Just as the phantom was spitting out blood, the slash in front was shattered by Lin An's spear. In an instant, the phantom stretched out his palm and hit the spear directly. The tip of the hand slapped the spear away from the direction. At this moment, Shui Ying's rich combat experience was completely exposed. Anyone else would have been penetrated by the siege at this moment. However, despite this, Shui Ying couldn't help but lean down and spit out blood again. Lin An's spear came second, mainly due to the light and shadow of Lin An's palm that came out of his palm. The power inside it was simply terrifying. While it possessed the power of countless laws, it also had a wave of collapse in an instant. It jumped into the body. Thousands of feet away, Lin An stabilized his body and looked at the shadow in the distance, with a cold smile on his lips. Throwing his arm, his hand was numb for a while due to the shock of the slash, but the waves with the law of life were being dispersed at a very fast speed, and after a while, it was already so weak that it was inaudible. Lin An raised his hand, and the golden spear condensed out again. Hey! Isn't this going to work? This battle is going to be a life and death battle for you. Shui Ying stood up straight, with a hint of killing intent in his tone. You may not know that the intact me is the me at my weakest. Only when I am stained with blood will my state slowly start to change. After he opened his mouth and laughed a few times, the phantom raised his hand and a long sword condensed out of it, and then he rushed directly towards Lin An. Lin An's eyes narrowed slightly, and then the fighting spirit rose again in his eyes. Well done! With a loud shout, Lin An suddenly stepped forward again, and a rich golden light began to appear all over his body. Wherever the golden light shines, everything seems to be dull. Almost instantly, Shui Ying discovered that there was something wrong with this golden light, but Lin An had turned into a torrent and came madly. At this moment, the arrow was already on the string and had to be fired. In the crisis, he had to raise his hand and wave. Immediately, a terrifying slash came towards him. After doing this, the shadow's figure stopped momentarily, and then violently retreated behind him. Lin An's momentum was like a rainbow. How could he let go at this moment? His figure disappeared in almost an instant, and the huge slash did not touch Lin An's shadow at all, and shot directly towards the depths of the universe. In a flash, Lin An suddenly appeared not far from the phantom again. While his body glowed with golden light, the spear in his hand suddenly shot directly towards the phantom. That wasn't the end yet. Lin An then waved his hands together, and suddenly a large area of extremely rich golden light lit up from the left and right sides, as if holding up a golden sky. And with the flash of golden light, the spears began to condense, and they took shape in an instant, and shot directly towards the phantom again. In an instant, Shui Ying was under great pressure. Lin An's body was flashing with golden light. This golden light was not only a rise in power, but also law fluctuations spreading rapidly along the light. This was Lin An's deliberate move. At this moment, shrouded in golden light, Shui Ying felt that Lin An's explosive spear was extremely fast, even almost catching up with the speed of light. However, in fact, it is not that Lin An has become faster at all, but that the speed of the shadow is slowing down. Under the full blessing of the law of time and the law of speed, Even if the shadow is both the master, it is still greatly affected by the spread of golden light. At this moment, Lin An's actions have begun to fail to keep up. Seeing the blast of a gun, and the large rain of spears that followed, the shadow's method was extremely slow. It took a long time before a violently distorted light curtain took shape. Almost the moment the lance came stuck, it was barely completed. The terrifying roar began to explode, and Lin An in the distance felt a little depressed. This light curtain was actually extremely strong. When the golden spear touched it, it shattered inch by inch from the tip of the spear to the end. However, what followed immediately was a large rain of spears. That large group of spears, there were dozens of them as far as the eye could see, followed closely and hit the light curtain, and the terrifying shock wave suddenly swept away. The huge legal turbulence formed a storm and spread instantly. However, Lin An could see the situation clearly. He saw that the light curtain persisted for several breaths, and finally cracks began to appear, and then spread throughout the light curtain. Finally, the entire light curtain exploded. The remaining torrent of spears blasted away the countless fragments and swept towards the shadow behind. However, with the light curtain blocking, the phantom's reaction time has increased too much. At this moment, a twisted palm print has emerged from the phantom's hand. Lin An's eyes flashed. As expected of the master level, his methods are endless. At this level, it is not easy to determine the winner. Which of these beings would be a simple existence, especially the old monster like the phantom who has lived for countless years? However, facing Lin An, everything is different. At this moment, Lin An stared at the phantom with burning eyes. Just as he swung his palm to meet the remaining golden spears, Lin An's figure suddenly moved. In an instant, the golden light shone brightly, and the golden light on Lin An's body was extremely strong in an instant. His figure flashed in an instant and appeared directly beside the phantom. In terms of methods, who can be the opponent of Lin An, who has all the attributes of the law? At this moment, Lin An caught the moment when the phantom made a move and had no time to change his moves, and raised his hand in an instant. In an instant, a rich golden light suddenly burst out, and the laws of time and speed where the golden light spread also became extremely rich, and the palm of the phantom's hand suddenly slowed down several times. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 467. At this moment, there was obviously deep shock in Xueying's eyes, and a strong life and death crisis spread from the bottom of his heart to his whole body. However, Lin An's methods have already been launched. How can he be soft now? This battle is bound to determine life and death. The rich golden light quickly condensed into two palm prints, and suddenly formed two big palms from the two directions of the sky and the ground, crushing the phantom in the middle. At this moment, there must be a fight. In an instant, extremely terrifying energy fluctuations spread out from the palm print, as if the entire sky and earth had transformed into it at that moment, and crashed towards the phantom in the middle. Under the terrifying power, Su Ying naturally felt it clearly, but under the spread of the extreme law of time and speed, he had no time to make any reaction, and was directly slapped in the middle by two big slaps. Boom! The terrifying impact was greater than ever before. In this blow, Lin An condensed too much power into it, so the shock wave caused by the collision was also extremely terrifying. Call. The huge impact, enveloping the raging turbulence of laws, was like a huge tsunami magnified countless times, sweeping out in an instant. At this moment, Lin An's figure suddenly turned over, but he still had no time to move away, and was directly pushed hundreds of thousands of miles away by this terrifying wave. After an unknown amount of time, when the storm gradually subsided, Lin's figure flashed past and came to the center of the storm again. The figure of the shadow is floating in the void. Yes, it is floating. At this moment, he seemed to have lost all his strength. His whole body was covered with bright red blood, and his aura was extremely weak. It seems that the dying person has only one breath left. Lin An looked at him. Although his expression was indifferent, there was emotion in his eyes. The day I stood up again, there were no accidents in my life. No one was my opponent. That was the case in the past and it is still the case now. In the end, I won this battle. As Lin An spoke, the fluctuations on Su Ying's body suddenly became stronger, and then there was a cough. Lin An was stunned for a moment and didn't say anything. Instead, the shadow spoke with difficulty. Sure enough, you won in the end. At the level of you and me, we are sensitive to everything. It's just that the general trend is the general trend, and this battle is inevitable. Lin An didn't speak, and looked at the shadow without sadness or joy. I heard Xueying speak again. At this level, life and death are no longer important, and defeating you is not unfair. But, can you tell me how many laws you have in you? Lin An smiled faintly. Don't you already know the answer? Xueying was startled, and then secretly laughed twice. That's right, he has known it for a long time, indeed he has known it for a long time. I don't know what kind of thoughts he had, but the shadow's voice suddenly stopped, and his breath also quietly disappeared at this moment, like an unextinguished candle. The next moment, Xueying's body turned into streaks of light and gradually dispersed. Lin An didn't say anything for a while, but turned around and looked behind him at the bright galaxy outside the abyss. Everything is finally coming to an end, and there will never be any other waves in life. A sigh, with emotion, too much. When Lin returned, it was already a few days later. When a beam of golden light emerged from the sky and finally fell directly into the floating island, this scene, just like the golden light leaving the earth, also fell in the eyes of countless people. The cheers quietly spread over an unknown distance. As Lin An landed, not long after, Yi Zhan and Chen Daoming appeared one after another. How's it going? Before anyone could understand, Chen Daoming's anxious voice came over. There was a slight smile in Lin An's eyes. I will take action personally, so there will be no surprises. Chen Daoming suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and Yi Zhan also looked happy. Lin paused, looking a little relaxed, and said slowly, from now on, the Earth will no longer have any external threats, and life on the Earth can finally be completely stable. Chen Daoming smiled and said, I have calmed down. The twists and turns are finally over. Lin An smiled and said, that's what I said, but you are still the deputy commander of the sky, right? Seeing the smile in Lin An's eyes, Chen Daoming didn't know what Lin An meant, so he couldn't help laughing and scolding, you brat, you don't have to be proud here, I quit. I want to go home and retire. Lin An couldn't help but laugh, okay, okay. If you leave, the world will be in chaos. Chen Daoming paused, and there seemed to be some relief in his eyes. After a while, he spoke again, I'm not joking, it's true. I have found someone who can inherit my position. Lin An's eyes narrowed, and then he laughed again, but this time the smile was obviously slightly different. That's good. You have worked hard for so many years. It's good to put down these burdens and take a rest. Chen Daoming nodded, then raised his head and looked at the sky, with mixed feelings in his heart. Time flies by. After 3 months. Under the huge ancient tree of life, there is a large area of outstanding palaces. The shapes of these palaces are somewhat strange, with an alternative sense of beauty emerging. The most amazing thing is that the height of these buildings is really high, and the best ones are almost a kilometer high. At this moment, the people in this new building complex are in a state of joy. Hey, have you heard? Lord Lindy is getting married. Are you stupid? It's already this time. Who wouldn't know? In front of the Emperor Tian Palace. In front of the huge square, on a high platform, there are 4 beautiful brides in wedding dresses standing in turn. Not far away, is Lin An in formal attire. The world is my witness, I, Lin An, am married to King Ian, Langzi, Banmen and Kimeng today. We have been together for thousands of years despite the vicissitudes of life. Lin An's voice solemnly spread throughout the world. In an instant, the whole world cheered, and the voices of the other 4 women followed closely behind Lin An's voice. At this moment, the whole world celebrates and all the people come to congratulate. Not far away, Chen Daoming looked at the stage with satisfaction, his eyes slightly red. When I first met you, I knew you were talented, but I didn't expect your brilliance today. It's really unpredictable. Lin An, from now on, my daughter will be handed over to you. Lin An had a smile in his eyes, and turned his eyes to the ladies, with a strong affection in his eyes.